You ever wake up one morning and feel like the universe just decided to test how much nonsense you can handle in a single day? That's how this story began. Not with a bang, not with some grand betrayal, but with something as small as a parking space. Yet somehow, that little square of asphalt outside my building turned into a war zone, and by the end of it, people I thought untouchable would be in handcuffs. My name's Michael Smith. I'm 42 years old, and for 8 years I've lived in a suburban neighborhood called Meadowbrook Heights. It's one of those communities where the grass stays just a little too green because the HOA fines you if it does, where neighbors wave with one hand and file complaints with the other. You know the type. For the most part, I kept my head down. I paid my dues, followed the rules, and minded my business. But this past March, early one Monday morning, I stepped out of my Toyota and realized minding my business wasn't going to cut it anymore. It was 7:00 a.m. The air was still sharp from the night before, and a thin layer of frost clung to the edges of windshields. I was already late for work, coffee balanced in one hand, briefcase in the other. I turned the corner into the underground garage and froze. There it was again, a cherry-red Porsche 911 gleaming like it had just rolled out of a showroom, parked in my spot. Spot number 23. My spot. The one I'd been paying extra fees for since I moved in. I sat there in my Toyota, engine idling, staring at the car. And then the driver's door swung open, and out stepped the reason my blood pressure still spikes when I hear the name, Tyler Morgan. He was maybe 22. Expensive haircut, designer jacket that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and a look on his face that screamed arrogance. He noticed me watching and grinned, like he knew exactly how much he was irritating me. Then, without hesitation, he swung his driver's door open again, deliberately slamming it into my car. The sound, God, I'll never forget it. That awful screech of metal on metal, sharp and ugly, echoing through the concrete garage like nails dragged across a chalkboard. I was out of my car before I even knew I'd moved. "You just scratched my car," I shouted. Tyler didn't even flinch. He turned to face me, and the smirk he gave me was the kind of thing you'd slap off someone if you didn't value your freedom. "Oops," he said casually. "Parking, tight around here. Maybe you should learn to park better, old man." Old man, I'm 42, not 82. But it wasn't the insult that got me, it was the laugh that followed. A short, mocking chuckle that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. "Hey," I snapped, pointing at the fresh scratch on my passenger side. "That was deliberate. You damaged my property." Tyler shrugged, already walking away. "Prove it." He flipped me off over his shoulder. "Maybe next time you'll think twice about where you park." And just like that, he was gone. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. 10 years working as a mechanic before I switched to accounting taught me how to tell the difference between an accident and intentional damage. This was no accident. This was a punk kid with too much money and too little respect telling me I didn't matter. But here's the thing about accountants, we notice details. And as Tyler walked off, one detail stood out like a neon sign. Hanging from his rearview mirror was a visitor's parking pass. Not unusual, except it was yellow. Our community switched to green visitor passes in January. Yellow ones were last year's issue. Expired. Worthless. Why would someone with an expired visitor pass feel entitled to take a paid, assigned spot? I approached him at the mailboxes, curiosity beating out anger. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "That visitor pass expired last year." For just a second, just a flicker, his smug confidence cracked. But then he sneered again. "Mom handles all the paperwork," he muttered. "Yellow passes were 22 to 23. I shook my head. "It's March, we're in 24 now." His jaw tightened. "Mind your own business, old man." And that's when she appeared, Laura Stone. If you've ever lived in an HOA community, you know the type. Mid-40s, hair styled so perfectly you wonder if she sleeps sitting up, clipboard always in hand, and eyes that look at you like you're dirt beneath her shoes. She'd been HOA president for 3 years, and she treated the position like royalty. Queen Laura of Meadowbrook Heights. "Problem here, Tyler?" she asked, appearing beside him like she'd been waiting in the shadows. "This guy's harassing me about parking," Tyler whined, voice full of fake victimhood. It was so convincing I almost believed it myself. Laura turned her cold, blue gaze on me. "Mr. Smith, Tyler has every right to use visitor spaces." "He's not in a visitor space," I shot back. "He's in my assigned spot, and his permit has expired." Laura's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'll handle Tyler's documentation personally. Don't interfere." The way she said interfere made it sound like a threat. Like I was the problem, not the kid who had just vandalized my car. I walked back to my Toyota, jaw clenched, but something kept nagging at me. Tyler's behavior around that Porsche was off. He hovered near it constantly. When neighbors passed, he positioned himself between them and the car, shielding it. When kids played nearby, he glared at them until they backed away. And every evening I noticed him making hushed phone calls by the vehicle, darting glances around like a guilty man waiting to be caught. It wasn't arrogance anymore, it was paranoia. And I'd seen enough fraud cases in my career to know paranoia always meant one thing: someone was hiding something. That evening, I told my wife Jennifer about it while we cleaned up dinner dishes. Jennifer's been teaching high school for 15 years, so she's seen every shade of entitled kid behavior. "That kid deliberately scratched our car," I told her, scrubbing a plate harder than necessary. "And his visitor pass is expired. Laura's covering for him, and I can't figure out why." Jennifer dried her hands on a towel and gave me that patient teacher look. "Are you sure it wasn't an accident?" "Jennifer," I said flatly, "I watched him do it. Door swing, scratch, laugh, walk away. He wanted me to see." She sighed. "What about the pass?" "That's what bothers me the most," I muttered. "Laura's protecting him, but why?" The question lingered in my mind long after she went to bed. Why would the HOA president risk her reputation defending some kid's expired permit? What did she gain? By the next morning, I'd made a decision that would change everything. See, being an accountant means I live and breathe documentation. Every receipt, every transaction, every suspicious pattern. So I started treating Tyler Morgan like I would any fraud case. Photos of the scratches, timestamps of his parking violations, documentation of his expired pass. If this kid wanted to play games, I'd play better. That Tuesday, he parked diagonally across 2 spots, blocking our neighbor's Honda. When she complained, Tyler just smirked and said, "Tell Laura if you have a problem," like her name was a magic shield. The arrogance was infuriating, but here, what Tyler didn't know about accountants: we're patient, we're thorough, and we don't stop until the truth surfaces. That night, while hauling trash to the dumpster, I caught something that sent a chill down my spine. Tyler wasn't just guarding his Porsche anymore. He was scanning the lot like he was waiting for someone. Sure enough, a dark SUV rolled slowly past, the driver lingering just long enough to make eye contact before driving off. Tyler stiffened, clutched his phone, then vanished inside. For the first time, he didn't look smug, he looked scared. And that's when I realized this wasn't about a spoiled kid with a shiny car anymore. Something much bigger was going on. Because paranoia doesn't come from nowhere, and neither do black SUVs watching your building in the middle of the night. You ever notice how the air feels heavier when you're being watched? It's not something you can explain with science, but your skin knows. That night after the SUV rolled by, I couldn't shake the feeling. Even after I locked the doors, even after Jennifer kissed me goodnight, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my chest tight, replaying that moment over and over. Why would anyone be watching Tyler? Why here? Why in our neighborhood? By morning, I'd decided I wasn't just imagining things. I'd spent years following paper trails, spotting anomalies that no one else cared about. Numbers don't lie, but people do. And when people lie, they always leave little crumbs. I just had to find them. So I started small. I went to the HOA office that Tuesday morning. Patricia, the secretary, had been working there for years. She was the type who knew everyone's business but usually kept her head down. I figured if anyone could confirm Tyler's visitor pass, it would be her. "Morning, Patricia," I said, trying to keep it casual. "Can you check on Tyler Morgan's pass for me? Looks expired." She froze, hands hovering over her keyboard. "Sorry, Mr. Smith. All vehicle inquiries go through Laura now. That stopped me cold. A permit check takes 30 seconds in their system. Why wall it off? Since when? I asked. Patricia glanced around, lowering her voice. She was very emphatic, said something about protecting Tyler's privacy, harassment concerns. Harassment over a parking permit. My instincts screamed at me this wasn't about privacy. This was about control. That evening, I started canvassing neighbors. In fraud work, you learn that people see things but keep quiet, waiting for someone else to ask the right question. My first stop was Patricia Wilson, a retired nurse who'd lived here longer than anyone. She poured me tea, hands trembling as she spoke. Laura told me not to discuss Tyler's car. She said I could face harassment charges. Harassment charges, I repeated, for talking about parking. She nodded, eyes darting toward her window like Laura might be listening. She's desperate to protect that boy. Makes you wonder what he's hiding. Exactly. Why protect someone so aggressively if he wasn't hiding something serious? The puzzle pieces didn't fit yet, but they were starting to form a picture, and I didn't like it. That night I called an old friend, David Wilson. We'd worked side by side in a mechanic shop for 10 years before I left for accounting. Now he owned his own place. More importantly, he had access to databases most people didn't even know existed. David, I said, I need a favor. Can you run a VIN check for me? He whistled low. What kind of suspicion? I told him about the scratches, the expired pass, the hushed phone calls, the SUV. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was overreacting. Instead, he said something that changed the direction of everything. Funny you should ask. A buddy of mine, vet good guy, lost his Porsche to thieves 8 months ago. Been tracking stolen luxury cars ever since. Bring me the VIN and I'll see what I find. A stolen car network. My stomach sank. Was Tyler driving a stolen Porsche? Getting that VIN would take some finesse. So the next morning, I walked over with a smile that felt unnatural on my face. Beautiful Porsche, I said. What year? Tyler eyed me suspiciously. 2019, why? My son's graduation's coming up, I lied. Thinking about getting him something similar. Mind if I take a peek inside? He hesitated, chewing his lip, but refusing would make him look paranoid. Finally, he popped the passenger door. I leaned in, admiring the dash, while my real focus zeroed in on the little plate visible through the windshield. The VIN, 12 digits committed to memory. 2 minutes later, I had what I needed. David called me back that afternoon. His voice was tight. Michael, sit down. That VIN matches my buddy's stolen Porsche. The guy's a staff sergeant, wounded vet. Lost it outside the VA hospital while he was at an appointment. My chest went hollow. Not just a car, a veteran's car, a recovery symbol ripped from someone who'd already lost enough. David, I whispered, this kid's been driving it for months. David's silence stretched a beat too long. Then, he wants to meet you tomorrow morning. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, staring at my scratched Toyota, thinking about that Porsche, thinking about the arrogance on Tyler's face every time he laughed at me. And all I could see was a wounded veteran limping out of a hospital to find his car gone. The next day I drove to David's garage. When I walked in, I saw him immediately, Staff Sergeant Miller. He stood straight despite the cane in his right hand. Dress uniform pressed sharp as a blade. His eyes met mine, steady and unflinching, and I knew in an instant this wasn't just about a car. You found her, he said quietly. I nodded, cherry-red Porsche 911. He swallowed hard, knuckles white on his cane. Bought her when I ditched the wheelchair, symbol that I was moving forward again, then one morning, gone. The weight of it pressed down on me. This wasn't about property. This was about dignity, recovery, hope. They target disabled vets, he said, voice low but edged with fury. Figure we won't chase them down because of injuries, easier prey. I felt something in me snap, anger hot and pure. Someone had looked at men who gave everything for this country and seen nothing but easy targets. Sergeant, I said, I want her back in your driveway, but more than that, I want Laura Stone exposed. not just arrested quietly, exposed. Miller studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. Roger that. I left that garage knowing two things. One, we weren't dealing with spoiled entitlement anymore. We were staring down organized crime. And two, Laura Stone wasn't just an annoying HOA president. She was something far darker. The cracks started showing fast. That evening I spotted Tyler slipping into Laura's condo, clutching a thick envelope. He glanced over his shoulder twice before shutting the door. Another night, I caught him scribbling notes by his car, ripping the pages out, stuffing them into his jacket like contraband. And every time I came near the parking lot, Laura appeared, watching, smiling that tight, cold smile that never reached her eyes. Then one of my neighbors whispered something that made my blood run cold. Michael, I overheard Laura yesterday. She said the neighbor's getting suspicious, and they need to handle this carefully. Handle what? Why would a parking complaint need handling? Unless it wasn't about parking at all. That night I pulled back the curtain in my living room and froze. Across the street the same black SUV idled, its headlights off, a silhouette in the driver's seat just barely visible. Watching, waiting. By the time I blinked, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't because now it was clear I wasn't just investigating fraud. I'd stumbled into something that could ruin lives or end them. And the deeper I dug, the closer I got to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to know. You ever had someone try to turn your whole community against you? Not just whispering behind your back, but standing in front of a crowd and painting you as a monster. That's what Laura Stone did to me. And to this day, I still remember the sound of neighbors' voices, the way they shifted in their seats when they thought maybe, just maybe, she was right. It started with a piece of paper. Friday evening, I came home from work to find an HOA notice slipped under every door in the complex. Big, bold letters stamped across the top. Emergency community meeting mandatory attendance. I'd been here 8 years and never seen one of those. Not once. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning. The wording was vague, urgent safety concern affecting residents. But I didn't need a crystal ball to know it was about me. I'd been poking too close to whatever Laura was protecting. The SUV outside, the whispers, Tyler's paranoia, it all added up. Saturday morning, the community center buzzed with nervous chatter. Folding chairs scraped the floor as people shuffled in. Parents clutched their kids a little tighter. Neighbors who used to wave at me avoided my eyes. Then Laura appeared at the front, laptop under her arm, expression carefully crafted, half-concerned leader, half-grieving mother. She clicked the projector on, and what I saw on that screen nearly knocked the air out of me. Grainy footage of a figure near the playground, someone holding a camera, someone who, in the shaky light of the projector, looked an awful lot like me. Residents, Laura began, voice quivering just enough to sound authentic. We have reason to believe our community has been compromised by unsafe behavior. Children's safety is at risk. A hush fell over the room. My stomach turned to stone. She gestured at the screen. Multiple families have reported feeling uncomfortable. This man, Michael Smith, has been conducting unauthorized surveillance near our children's play areas, photographing, following, lurking. Gasps, whispers, the scrape of chairs. I felt every eye in the room burn into me, judging, condemning. That's not me, I said, my voice breaking louder than I intended. That's... But she cut me off with a sharp look. The evidence speaks for itself. She produced a thick folder, waving it like holy scripture. Witness statements, photos, documentation of obsessive behavior toward young residents. Neighbors shifted, murmuring. Some leaned away from me. Parents pulled their kids closer. For a man who's always prided himself on keeping his reputation clean, there is no pain quite like seeing it shattered in an instant. I wanted to shout, to scream, to grab every one of them and shake them awake. But what good would that do? Laura had the floor. Laura had the narrative. And then my friend David stood up. Hold on, he said, voice calm but firm. From the back row he walked forward, tablet in hand. That video is fake. The room went dead silent. Laura's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat. David pointed at the screen. Look at the shadows, look at the trees in the background, they don't match our playground. The timestamps don't line up with daylight hours. This isn't real footage, it's a composite, professionally edited. A ripple of doubt spread across the room. People squinted at the screen, whispering again, but differently this time. Laura recovered fast. David Wilson has a long friendship with Mr. Smith. Of course, he'd defend him, but community safety requires objectivity. But David wasn't done. He tapped his tablet, projecting comparison images on the screen. He highlighted compression artifacts, inconsistent lighting, metadata embedded in the video files. This was stitched together from multiple sources. Someone spent serious money making it look real. Ask yourselves, why would an HOA president be producing fake evidence instead of calling the police if she really thought children were at risk? That question landed like a grenade. Heads swiveled, murmurs grew louder, and then Patricia, sweet, quiet Patricia, spoke up from the front row. "Laura," she said softly, "if you believed this, why didn't you call law enforcement?" Laura's answer was smooth, too smooth. Some situations are better handled internally. But her eyes betrayed her, cold, calculating, evasive. And right there in that community hall, the perfect image she'd been crafting cracked. Before I could breathe relief, Tyler, of all people, approached me. His timing couldn't have been worse. Every eye in the room followed him as he leaned close. His voice shook. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know she'd take it this far." I pulled back to look at him. "You knew?" I asked, my voice carrying louder than I meant. "She said you were a threat, I thought." He glanced nervously at Laura. "I thought she just meant parking stuff." The whispers grew sharper now. Neighbors leaning in, trying to hear. Tyler's fear was visible. For the first time, the smug mask was gone. By the end of that meeting, the neighborhood was split clean down the middle. Some still believed Laura's evidence. Some believed David's technical breakdown, and a large chunk were simply confused, unsure who to trust. But one thing had changed: doubt. Doubt had been planted, and once doubt takes root, control starts to slip. That night back at home, Jennifer's hands shook as she made tea. "Michael," she whispered, "parents are avoiding us. The Morrisons told their kids not to come near our yard. What if people really believe this?" I pulled her into my arms, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "We fight back with the truth." But before I could explain my plan, a phone buzzed on the counter. A text message, no name, just words. "Your husband made a mistake tonight. Check your car." We rushed outside, all 4 of our tires slashed. A note under the windshield wiper read, "This is just the beginning." Jennifer gasped. My fists clenched so hard I thought I'd break my own bones. But it didn't stop there. At 3 in the morning, a crash shattered the silence. Glass exploded in our living room. A brick lay on the carpet, wrapped in a photograph of Jennifer leaving work. Across her face, in red marker, one word: soon. I stared at it, hands shaking. Rage, fear, disbelief, they all churned together in my chest until I thought I'd burst. And that's when Tyler appeared at my door. Not cocky, not arrogant, but trembling, pale, eyes darting to the shadows. "Michael," he whispered urgently, "they're coming for you tonight." And with those words, the last illusion of this being a simple HOA dispute burned away. This wasn't about parking anymore. This was survival. You ever have one of those moments where the villain you thought you knew suddenly seems small, and the person you thought was your enemy turns out to be a victim? That night, when Tyler showed up on my doorstep, trembling like a stray dog in a storm, I realized everything I thought I knew about him was about to change. It was just past 3:30 a.m. The brick still lay on the living room rug, glass crunching under my boots as I picked it up. Jennifer sat on the couch, pale as a sheet, clutching the threatening photo like it might disappear if she let go. And Tyler, this kid who'd spent months smirking in my face, stood in our doorway shaking so badly he could barely speak. "They're coming for you tonight," he whispered. His voice cracked like it hurt to say it. I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "Laura found the GPS tracker," he blurted, glancing over his shoulder like she might appear out of the shadows. "She's lost it. She thinks you're working with the feds. You need to disappear now." Wait, I cut him off, heart pounding. What GPS tracker? His eyes widened. He hadn't meant to say that. The one David put on my car when he sabotaged it. My head spun. Sabotaged? Tyler, what are you talking about? He dropped onto a chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked young, not arrogant, not smug, just scared. You didn't destroy my car? He asked, his voice small. No, I said flatly. His laugh was bitter, hollow. Laura told me you did. She said you wrecked the engine and tires to ruin me. She showed me the tracker, said you were stalking me, trying to destroy my life. I sank into the chair across from him, realization dawning. She lied to you. He nodded miserably, rubbing his face with both hands. She's been lying since the day my parents died. And then the dam broke. My parents were killed in a car accident 18 months ago. Laura was my mom's best friend. She became my legal guardian because nobody else stepped up. I thought she was helping me. I thought she cared. But she's been stealing from me, Michael, my inheritance, my trust fund, everything. The words spilled out, shaky, raw, but honest. She told me I owed her, said driving the Porsche was temporary just until the paperwork cleared. But it wasn't temporary. She was using me, using the car, using everything. Jennifer reached over, laying a gentle hand on his arm. Tyler flinched at first, then melted into it like he hadn't felt kindness in years. She controls everything, he whispered. Where I live, what I drive, even what money I get for food. She convinced the court I'm too unstable from grief to manage anything myself. If I challenge her, she can have me declared incompetent, institutionalized, forever. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Tyler, I said carefully, that car you've been driving, it's not just a car. It was stolen from a wounded veteran, Staff Sergeant Miller. His head snapped up, eyes wide with horror. What? It was his recovery symbol. He bought it after he learned to walk again. Laura made you complicit in stealing from a veteran. Tears welled in his eyes. He pressed his palms into them like he could push the truth away. She said it was temporary, he croaked. She said it was just paperwork. She lied. My voice was steady, but inside I was burning. She's not protecting you, she's destroying you. He nodded slowly, defeated, like the weight of it was crushing him. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a key. He held it out with trembling fingers. David told me to give you this if things went bad. It's for storage unit 47 on Maple Street. That's where she keeps the paperwork, all of it. Cars, money, guardianship, everything. I took the key, cold metal biting into my palm. Proof. Jennifer whispered, Tyler, why now? Why come here tonight? He looked at her, then at me. His voice was raw but steady. Because I can't let Miller suffer because of me. I've been driving his car around like it belonged to me. But it never did. Laura's planning to disappear everything, cars, documents, even me. She said she's shipping me to Nevada this weekend. Once I'm declared incompetent, she'll own me. Forever. He leaned forward, eyes shining with desperation. Michael, you don't get it. She killed my parents. The words hit me like a punch. What did you just say? Tyler's lip trembled. Mom told me the brakes failed, but Laura told me she slipped once, that the lines were cut. Then she covered it up, said it was the winter roads. She admitted it. Jennifer gasped, hand flying to her mouth. My own heart hammered like a war drum. You're saying Laura murdered them to get your inheritance? He nodded once, tears spilling now. She said accidents happen, but I know what she meant. The room went silent except for his ragged breathing. And then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. 3 words that froze me where I sat. Time running out. I showed it to Tyler. His face went pale. That's her, he whispered. She knows I'm here, she's coming. I looked at Jennifer, at the shattered window, at the key clenched in my hand. And for the first time in my life, I understood what real danger felt like. This wasn't a feud anymore. This was survival against a woman willing to kill for control. I leaned forward, voice low but firm. Tyler, you need to decide. Are you going to keep letting her use you, or are you ready to fight back? His eyes met mine, wet but fierce. I'm ready. And in that moment, I realized the spoiled brat who'd scratched my car into oblivion was gone. In his place was a scared young man finally standing up against the monster who'd stolen everything from him. The only question was, would we survive long enough to expose her? You ever watch someone smile while they're threatening your family? That's the kind of monster Laura Stone was. She didn't need to raise her voice or wave a weapon. She made promises with a grin, promises that made the air in the room feel poisonous. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at home, piecing together the evidence Tyler had given me when there was a knock at the door. Heavy, purposeful. The kind of knock that tells you whoever's outside isn't selling cookies. When I opened it, Laura was standing there, arms crossed, flanked by two men I'd never seen before. They weren't neighbors. They weren't contractors. They looked like professionals, tall, broad, faces like stone, eyes that scanned my living room the moment they stepped inside. "Michael," Laura said sweetly, "we need to talk." Jennifer froze in the kitchen doorway, clutching a dish towel. Tyler, sitting on our couch with his backpack still packed like he might need to run any second, went pale. Laura walked in like she owned the place. The two men followed, shutting the door behind them. The sound of that door closing, heavy wood thudding into the frame, made my stomach clench. She set a large envelope on the table. "$30,000 in cash," she said casually, like she was offering me a casserole. "Take it and this ends, no more questions, no more accidents." I didn't move. "You're trying to bribe me." She smiled wider, but her eyes stayed cold. "Call it whatever helps you sleep at night. Cooperation comes in many forms. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's silence." She leaned in closer. "And sometimes it's survival." Jennifer's hand shook as she gripped the counter. Tyler stared at the floor, shame burning his cheeks. And me? I sat there with my phone, recording the whole thing from my pocket, my heart pounding so hard I thought she might hear it. "You're threatening my family," I said quietly. Laura tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Not at all. I'm explaining consequences. You've got a lovely wife. Be a shame if she had an accident on her drive to work, like Tyler's parents." The room went ice cold. Jennifer gasped. Tyler's head snapped up, eyes wide with terror. "Stop," he shouted, his voice breaking. "You don't get to talk about them." Laura's smile never faltered. "I took you in, Tyler. I gave you a home, and this is how you repay me, by conspiring with nosy neighbors." "You stole everything from me," he yelled, tears streaming down his face. "My parents, my money, my life, everything." For the first time, Laura's eyes flickered. Not guilt, not sadness, just pure fury at being exposed. But she recovered fast, smoothing her expression. She turned back to me. "This is your last warning, Michael. Drop it, or you'll regret ever moving into Meadowbrook Heights." She slid the envelope closer. The smell of cash, faint but sharp, filled the room. And then she stood, signaling to her men. They left as calmly as they came, shutting the door with that same heavy thud. The silence afterward was unbearable. Jennifer dropped the towel. Tyler buried his face in his hands. I sat there staring at the envelope, the weight of it like a bomb on my table. I pulled out my phone and ended the recording. Evidence. Every word she'd spoken, every threat, every offer of bribery, proof that Laura Stone wasn't just corrupt, she was criminal. That night, neighbors started whispering more loudly. Patricia came by, trembling, clutching half-burned papers she said she'd found under Laura's deck. "She dropped these while hauling out trash," Patricia whispered. "Bank statements, Guardian paperwork, smudged but legible, transfers from Tyler's trust funds straight into Laura's personal account." "Keep them safe," Patricia begged. "She'll come for them." She was right, because the more we dug, the more desperate Laura became. Later that evening, I found Tyler packing outside under the weak glow of the streetlight, chain-smoking like he was trying to burn the fear out of his lungs. His hands shook as he flicked ash onto the pavement. "She's losing it," he muttered. "She told me if I didn't shut you up, she'd have me committed by Friday. She already has the papers drawn up." "Committed?" I asked. He nodded miserably. "Psychiatric facility in Nevada. Once I'm declared incompetent, she'll have permanent control of my inheritance. I'll never get out." The words hit me harder than the brick through my window. She wasn't just stealing money. She was stealing lives. And she wasn't done. The next morning, neighbors reported strange men hanging around the parking lot. One leaned against a black SUV, arms crossed, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy. Another sat on a bench near the mailboxes, pretending to read a paper but never turning the page. Jennifer whispered as we walked to the car, "Michael, they're watching us." She was right, and that's when I realized Laura had escalated. No more hiding behind HOA bylaws, no more fake evidence. Now it was intimidation, plain and simple. But here's the thing about intimidation. It only works if you let it. That night I met with David and Sergeant Miller in the garage. The storage unit key Tyler had handed me burned in my pocket the whole drive there. When I placed it on the table, Miller's jaw tightened. "That's it?" he asked. Tyler nodded, his voice small. "Unit 47, Maple Street, everything in there." David cracked his knuckles. "Then it's time we stop reacting and start fighting back." We sat there in the oil-stained garage, surrounded by the smell of grease and gasoline, planning how to take down a woman who thought she owned our community. Tyler hunched over, ashamed but determined. Miller stood tall, a veteran who'd already lost too much to let criminals win. And me, an accountant who just wanted his damn parking spot back, now sitting at the center of something that felt bigger than I could have imagined. Jennifer joined us halfway through, setting down coffee mugs with trembling hands but eyes full of fire. "If she's threatening families, then she's already lost control. You make sure every word she says, every lie she tells, is documented." She was right. The only way to beat someone like Laura was to show the world who she really was. But before the night was over, Patricia called. Her voice shook so badly I could barely understand her. "She came to my door," she whispered, "with two men, demanded the papers back, said accidents happen to old women who can't keep their mouths shut." My blood boiled. Laura was targeting the most vulnerable, counting on fear to silence them. But Patricia had hidden copies in her safe, proof that even fear couldn't erase. By Thursday morning, Laura's mask had cracked wide open. She wasn't the polished HOA president anymore. She was desperate, cornered, dangerous. And desperate people make mistakes. That evening, while I stood at my window, I saw her loading boxes into her trunk. Fast, efficient. Tyler stood beside her, bruises visible on his face, eyes red from crying. He kept glancing at my house, his expression not cocky, not smug, but terrified. I knew then, Laura was trying to erase everything before it came crashing down. But she didn't know I already had the key to the vault. And soon, every secret she'd tried to bury was going to see the light of day. You ever unlock a door and feel like your whole life is about to split in two, before and after? That's what it felt like the night we opened Storage Unit 47. It was nearly midnight, rain misting down just enough to make the asphalt shine under the streetlights. The Maple Street storage facility was one of those 24-hour places, rows of corrugated steel doors lined up like soldiers in the dark. The place smelled of rust and damp concrete. A single buzzing floodlight flickered above the office, throwing shadows across the lot. David drove us there in his truck. Sergeant Miller sat in the passenger seat, silent, his eyes scanning the shadows like he was back on patrol overseas. I sat in the back with Tyler, who hadn't said more than 3 words since Laura's men showed up at my house. His hoodie was pulled low, hands stuffed deep in the pockets, knees bouncing with nervous energy. When we pulled up to Unit 47, my heart was hammering. The padlock looked ordinary enough, but the weight of that small key in my hand felt anything but. "You ready?" David asked. I nodded, even though I was. The key slid into the lock with a satisfying click. The metal door groaned as we rolled it upward, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. A cold, musty draft hit us immediately, carrying the smell of old cardboard, engine oil, and mildew. Inside, the unit was packed floor to ceiling with boxes, binders, and filing cabinets. Not the random junk most people keep in storage. No furniture, no holiday decorations, no bicycles, just paper. Stacks and stacks of it. Miller stepped inside first, his cane clicking against the concrete floor. He opened the nearest box, pulling out a binder. His face tightened as he flipped through the pages. Titles, he muttered. Car titles, all luxury vehicles, all stolen. David grabbed another binder, eyes scanning the columns. Financial transfers, offshore accounts, multiple shell companies, she's laundering the money. I pulled out a folder at random and froze. Inside were copies of court documents, guardianship papers, medical records, psychiatric evaluations, all with Tyler's name, and every single one stamped with Laura Stone's signature. She was building a case, I whispered, bile rising in my throat. She forged half of this, made you look unstable so she could lock you away. Tyler's face crumpled. He sank onto a crate, running his hands through his hair. She said it was just paperwork. She said it was temporary. It was never temporary, Miller said grimly. She planned this for years. She groomed your family. When your parents died, she swooped in like a vulture. And then David found the bombshell. Literally, a manila folder labeled accidents. Inside were photographs, a crumpled sedan on a snowy road, newspaper clippings about a tragic brake failure, police reports marked as closed. Tyler's voice cracked when he saw them. That's my parents' car. But it wasn't just them. The folder contained 3 other crashes, all accidents. All families from HOA communities Laura had influence over. This isn't just about money, I said, my hands shaking as I flipped through the files. She's been eliminating people who stood in her way. The silence that followed was suffocating. The only sound was the hum of the flickering floodlight outside. Miller finally broke it. We need to get this to the police, now. But David shook his head. Not yet. If we hand this over too soon, she'll spin it. Say we stole the documents. Say we doctored them. We need a chain of custody. We need proof this came from her hands, not ours. As if on cue, headlights swept across the row of units. A black SUV rolled slowly past the gate, stopping just long enough for the driver to look in. Then it kept going. Tyler stiffened. She knows we're here. Load what we can, Miller barked. His military tone snapped us all into motion. We grabbed boxes, snapping photos with our phones, documenting every label. I stuffed the guardianship papers into my backpack. David hauled binders of financial records. Miller carried the folder marked accidents like it was sacred scripture. But before we could close the door, a voice rang out across the lot. Step away from the unit. We froze. 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Men in dark coats, one holding a flashlight, the other 2 with hands hovering near their waists in a way that screamed concealed weapons. Laura's men. Unit 47 is private property, the one with the flashlight called. Turn over the contents. Miller shifted his cane, his jaw set. Over my dead body. My pulse roared in my ears. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and standing in the middle of a dark lot with nothing but paper for protection. David leaned close, whispering, Michael, grab the binders, get them out the back. I'll stall them. No, I hissed, they'll kill you. But David's eyes were steady. Better me than all of us. Before I could argue, Tyler did something I'll never forget. He stepped forward out of the shadows, his voice trembling but loud. You want it, he shouted. Take it from me, I'm the one you've been using. The men froze. For a moment they didn't know how to respond, and that hesitation was all we needed. Miller slammed the storage door down, the metal crashing like thunder. David jammed the lock back in place. We grabbed what we could carry and bolted through the side gate, rain soaking our clothes, paper crinkling in our arms. Behind us, fists pounded on the metal door. Voices shouted, but we kept running until our lungs burned and our legs gave out. We collapsed in David's truck, drenched and shaking. Boxes and binders spilled across the seats. Tyler clutched the guardianship folder to his chest like a lifeline. We have enough, I gasped. We have more than enough. But Miller's eyes stayed fixed on the rearview mirror, watching the dark SUVs circling the lot. Enough to take her down, he said grimly, if we live long enough to deliver it. You ever watch someone try to rewrite reality so many times they start to believe their own lies? That's what happened when Laura went on the offensive. She didn't just send men to storage units or smear me in front of polite neighbors. She weaponized institutions we all trust. The HOA, local police, even the fragile rule of trust the system. And watching that slow-burn gaslight take hold was one of the most chilling things I've ever lived through. It began the morning after we hauled the binders and the accidents folder into David's garage. Rain had left the streets slick, making the world look twice as bright and twice as threatening. I remember the sound of the radio in David's shop humming under our voices, the faint metallic clink of tools in the background. We spread the documents out across a long bench. Ledgers, bank transfers, forged Guardian paperwork, titles for luxury cars with altered VINs, and that folder with car crash photos that smelled faintly of smoke, like evidence someone had tried to incinerate in a hurry. We felt like conspirators, guilty maybe by technicality, but mostly like men who had found a rotten tooth and now had to pull it, no matter how much the jaw swelled. Miller's face was carved in lines of concentration. His fingers traced bank routing numbers like a man reading friends' names off a casualty list. Tyler sat silent, fists white on his knees, watching us as if we were performing a ritual that would decide whether he lived or disappeared. Then my phone buzzed, a call from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me. The voice on the other end was edited for calm, smooth, practiced. "Mr. Smith," it said. "This is Officer Hernandez, District 3. We've had a number of complaints filed about your behavior in the neighborhood, and we need to speak with you." My mouth went dry. I hadn't expected the police to show up on Laura's command, but the way the moment landed, calculated, official, told me everything I needed to know. She was buying loyalty and influence faster than anyone could keep score. I told Hernandez I'd be at the station in an hour. I told no one I was shaking. Instead, I told David to take the binders home and back up everything to the cloud. Don't leave anything physical where it could be misplaced. Miller put his hand on my shoulder like a man steadying a recruit before a mission. Not speeches. No bravado. Just the kind of quiet, shared resolve only people who have stared something dangerous in the eye can give. At the police station, the fluorescent lights buzzed with bureaucratic indifference. Officer Hernandez was younger than I expected, badge new enough to reflect the light in a blinding way. He was all procedure forms, signatures, curt nods, and his questions felt rehearsed. "We've received reports of you photographing children. Witnesses say you were stalking the playground." He tapped at a tablet, and I watched the words appear like a script being fed to him. I'd been framed before. LAURA had shown grainy composite videos, and people had seen what they wanted to see. But for a cop to read it out loud, that stung different. It took every ounce of muscle control I had not to snap the officer's neck. Instead, I slid him the recording from my pocket. "I have a recording of Laura offering me bribe money and threatening my family," I said. "I also have evidence that links her to stolen vehicles and financial fraud. I want this added to the complaint." He took the thumb drive with careful fingers. He promised to file an incident report to escalate if necessary. I wanted to believe him. I wanted the uniform to mean something. But deep down, reading the tired lines around his mouth, I knew the system was porous. Money and influence leaked through it like water through an old roof. Within hours, the atmosphere in Meadowbrook changed. Laura's campaign flared like lint catching a match. She called an emergency HOA meeting, but not at the community center this time. She staged it at the country club's private room, the kind of place where the rich neighbors who matter eat breakfast and the rest of us get the leftovers. Invitations went out to homeowners, press releases slipped to a local reporter, and the narrative she sponsored was tight and simple. The neighborhood was under threat from a man who had been stalking families, escalating to harassment and property damage. She couched it as safety first. People respond to simple things, especially when they include fear. Radio trucks rolled up that evening like vultures smelling a weak thing. Cameras blinked, and a new veneer of professional concern coated the whole affair. Laura's press conference was polished. Her dress, her words, the way her hand rested lightly on a stack of prepared statements. She'd learned performance art from the best manipulators. She spoke of community safety and due process, and she looked on camera like the reasonable adult in a world gone loud. They ran a headline that night. Local HOA president calls for immediate investigation into neighbor harassment. Photos of me from the faked footage blurred across screens and social feeds. Somebody even doctored a still to make it look like I was lurking in the playground at dusk. Context vanished. The lie took root. Then came the letters. Certified mail stuffed into our mailbox and left in the driveway like little lacerations. A restraining order petition filed by anonymous complainants. HOA notices of pending disciplinary action. The HOA board, most of whom I'd waved at saying good morning for years, suddenly sent texts that read like legal threats, their thumbs trembling as they typed language fed to them by Laura's lawyers. I could feel my life bending under the weight of a narrative someone else had built. People I once called neighbors now crossed the street to avoid me. My son's little league coach called to say he'd heard rumors and thought it best our boy sit out a few games until things settled. Jennifer sat on the kitchen floor that night and sobbed until she fell asleep, exhausted from fighting a war she hadn't signed up for. But all of that, the lies, the headlines, the law papers, was a front. Laura didn't just influence the HOA and media. She had people in the police department willing to listen and to act on prompts she fed them. She could make appearances at the prosecutor's office look casual. She could get a patrol car to swing by our house under the guise of a welfare check. Little gestures, small nudges, but they add up. Our defense was messy and human in a way her machine never would be. Miller, with patience honed by structure, worked the legal angles. David, furious and technical, traced shell companies and set up redundancies of our copies. Patricia, the secretary with the burned papers, faced Laura's men and still brought us the scraps she'd salvaged. And Tyler, God help him, was trying to reconcile the weight of being both a pawn and a witness. He nervously handed me another folder one night, a ledger showing pay-ins to Laura's accounts from numbered shell entities, names of buyers for luxury cars across 3 states, a pattern neat and ugly. Then, when it seemed like the net around me was tightening, something happened I hadn't expected. A phone call from a number I'd never seen before. "This is Agent Smith," the voice said. "Department of Justice. We've been monitoring Laura Stone for months. We heard about your investigation. We need to meet." I sat there on the couch, the phone trembling in my hand, as if clinging to evidence of reality. Federal agents, not local cops. Federal, that phrase changes things. It's like moving from whispers in a cul-de-sac to the clang of heavyweight doors in a courthouse. They wanted copies of everything. The binders, the accidents folder, Tyler's testimony, the recording of Laura's threats. They wanted detailed timelines, names, dates. Miller, used to following orders and giving them, liaised with Agent Smith, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the scales tip. But even the federal attention came with complications. Laura had friends beyond Meadowbrook's hedges. She had connections in probate courts, in elder care legal networks. Her money had bought more than silence. It had purchased plausible deniability. Laura's defense could look like complex family arrangements misinterpreted. She could hire teams to interrogate our motives, question our integrity, and smear us as vigilantes. Still, with federal involvement, the kind of protection and resources that followed were different. We had secure evidence transfer, witness protection protocols discussed in hushed tones, and someone who listened without flipping channels. A plan was drawn. Gather airtight chains of custody, corroborate Tyler's story with Miller's vehicle restoration data, and keep Patricia and other witnesses insulated from direct contact with Laura. That's when Laura made the mistake that would become her downfall. She got overconfident. She staged a community reconciliation event, press, cameras, and a slick PR team. She'd bet that if she could get enough people in a room to clap for her narrative, the rest would follow. The night of her event, she wore a dress that glittered under the lights and stood behind a lectern like a queen pardoning herself. Her speech was polished, rehearsed. She spoke of community values, safety for children, and the importance of unity. People clapped politely. People who'd never asked a question nodded. The machine worked for the many: confusion, fear. The human instinct to follow the person who looks like they know what they're doing. But Miller had other plans. He walked into that event not as a quiet neighbor, but as a veteran with calm authority. Beside him was the prosecutor's aide we, quietly spoken with, and behind them, almost unnoticed, were 2 federal agents in plain clothes. The plan had been simple. Let Laura gather her applause, then dismantle the facade in front of the community, using sound evidence and authoritative voices she couldn't buy. When Miller rose to speak, the room leaned in. People recognized him from the garage, from church, from the daycare pickup lines. He spoke about dignity and recovery, about how a symbol of reclaiming life had been taken and trafficked. He spoke about veterans as targets and about the paper trail that led back to Meadowbrook. And then Agent Smith stepped forward and, with federal calm that cuts through social theater like a well-honed blade, announced the scope of the investigation. Cameras flashed. The murmurs shifted into stunned silence. Laura's face changed. Not panic, a more dangerous expression, calculated fury. Her smile reassembled itself like a mask. But underneath, you could see her mind working. Lawyers, damage control, a narrative to spin. She was a predator cornered, and predators lash out. After the event, things escalated again. She filed a lawsuit against me for defamation, a maneuver that bought her time and complicated the legal landscape. She also used her HOA allies to initiate internal investigations, dragging this mess into endless committees and panel reviews. For every federal knock at her door, she produced court filings and counterclaims that bled time and resources. It was exhausting, sapping energy from our small team. We lost some battles. People still believed her. Our phones rang with threats. We slept badly. Jennifer moved Tyler into a spare room. We rotated shifts so someone was always awake. Sometimes I'd look at my son's face and wonder if I'd made the right choice by not stepping back when the first scratch happened. I told myself we were buying safety for more than our family. I told myself that letting Laura continue meant letting predators flourish. And there were nights when the moral question gnawed at me. What right did I have to endanger people, to drag my family into this? The quiet truths I clung to were simple and ugly. Sometimes justice requires ordinary people to be loud. Sometimes speaking up makes you the target. There is no nobility shield. There is only choice and consequence. Then on a Tuesday that smelled faintly of diesel and wet earth, a car pulled up outside our house and idled for a long time. I watched it from the blinds. The engine hummed like a throat clearing. Inside, two men in suits sat like statues. One of them flicked on a small light and scanned the house. I called Agent Smith. He told me to stay put and to lock every door to let the federal team coordinate. But as I watched that car, the old, visceral fear returned. The knowledge that Laura's tentacles could reach into any dark corner. The difference now was I was not alone. The federal team had stones to move and subpoenas to issue. They had the muscle to turn over bank accounts and the authority to pull down registrations. But they also had timelines. Bureaucracies don't sprint, they methodically crush. I kept reminding myself of that, the slow, steady march of law. That night I lay awake listening to the house breathe. Jennifer slept fitfully, the lines around her eyes deepening. I thought about Tyler bending over in David's truck, clutching those papers like a talisman. I thought of Miller returning to his driveway with a smile that hadn't been there for months. I thought about Patricia, old hands trembling but holding on. And then, like a thunderclap in the dark, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We're not done." She told us to wait. "Tonight we act." I looked at Jennifer and whispered, "They're coming." She sat up, eyes wide, and reached for the phone that had become our lifeline. The difference now was that our lifeline had weight behind it, federal agents who had seen the documents and who were preparing their own moves. But even with that, the clock felt cruel. Every second was precious. We were in the middle of an ugly, drawn-out fight between quiet, ordinary people and a woman who'd learned to stitch law, money, and cruelty into an armor. The next steps would be chaotic, dangerous, and maybe painful. But if the last months taught me anything, it's this. You can't let corrupt people manage the narrative. You have to tear it down, piece by piece, no matter how much noise they make. And as I sat there, heart thudding against the night, I knew the next day would be the kind that leaves life into before and after. You ever notice how the air feels different the morning you know everything is going to change? It's thicker, heavier, like the world itself is holding its breath. That's how it felt the day Laura Stone finally lost control. The night before had been the longest of my life. After that text, "We're not done. Tonight we act." I didn't sleep. Jennifer dozed in the chair beside me, our son curled up on the couch, Tyler sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing. His hoodie was pulled tight, like fabric could protect him from everything he'd lived through. Miller paced the living room like it was a guard post in some far-off desert. And me. I just sat there listening for sounds that didn't belong. A car idling too long, footsteps crunching gravel. the creak of the front gate. But nothing came, not that night. Instead, the storm hit the next morning. It began with pounding on the door, not polite knocking, pounding heavy enough to rattle the frame. Jennifer's eyes snapped open. My son sat bolt upright. Tyler flinched so hard his chair scraped the tile. "Michael Smith, open up," a voice barked. For a moment my heart plummeted. Police, feds, or Laura's men dressed to look like either. I peered through the peephole and froze. It was both. Two uniformed officers, and behind them, plainclothes federal agents, badges flashing. I opened the door cautiously. The lead agent, a man in a gray suit with eyes that looked like they'd seen too many lies, stepped forward. "Mr. Smith, Agent Smith, Department of Justice. We're serving a federal warrant on Laura Stone. We need you and your evidence now." Relief hit me so hard I almost collapsed, but the agent's next words sharpened it into fear again. "She knows she's moving fast. If we don't act now, she disappears everything." We gathered what we had: the binders, the guardianship papers, the accident folder, my phone recordings, Patricia's burned scraps. Tyler stuffed documents into his backpack, hands trembling, but his face set with a determination I hadn't seen before. The convoy rolled out of Meadowbrook like something out of a war movie. 2 unmarked SUVs, 1 patrol car, and David's old truck rumbling behind us. Miller insisted on driving in his uniform, medals pinned to his chest, like a man daring the world to question him. We pulled up to Laura's house just after sunrise. The place looked deceptively ordinary, 2-story colonial, shutters painted HOA-approved beige, flower beds trimmed to perfection. But under that neat exterior was rot, and today the rot was about to spill into daylight. Agents fanned out, pounding on the door. "Federal warrant, open up." No answer. They breached. The door splintered, swinging open with a crash. Inside, the air smelled of perfume and bleach, like someone had been cleaning frantically, erasing traces. Boxes were stacked in the hallway, half-packed. A shredder hummed in the corner, paper strips spilling onto the carpet. And there she was, Laura Stone, calm, collected, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee like she'd been waiting for us. Her hair was perfect, her smile cool, her eyes glinting with defiance. "Well," she said smoothly, "this is dramatic." The agents read her the warrant, listing charges: fraud, embezzlement, theft, conspiracy, even suspicion of homicide tied to staged accidents. But Laura didn't flinch. She sipped her coffee, then looked directly at me. "Michael," she purred, "you think this ends me? I'll have lawyers lined up before your little accountant brain can even file a tax return. You'll drown in paperwork, and when the dust settles, I'll still be standing." For a moment, I almost believed her. The arrogance, the control, it was convincing. But then Tyler stepped forward. "No," he said, voice shaking but loud enough to fill the room. "You're done." He dropped his backpack on the table, unzipped it, and spilled the contents: guardianship papers, bank statements, signed withdrawals, accident files. The evidence scattered across her perfect table like shards of glass. The agents pounced, snapping photos, securing documents. Miller laid down the folder with his Porsche's stolen title like it was a final nail in a coffin. Laura's mask cracked then. Not much, just a flicker in her eyes, a tightening of her jaw, but I saw it. For the first time, she wasn't untouchable. The agents cuffed her hands behind her back. Even then, she smirked at the cameras flashing outside, reporters already gathering like vultures. "This is temporary," she hissed as they let her out. "You'll all regret this." Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Parents clutched their kids tighter. For the first time in months, I saw recognition in their eyes, not suspicion of me, but horror at her. That night, the neighborhood felt different. Quiet. Not safe, not yet, but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Jennifer held my hand as we sat on the porch, watching police tape flutter in the breeze. Tyler sat beside us, exhausted but free, his shoulders no longer hunched under invisible chains. Miller drove home with his Porsche parked proudly in his driveway again, not just a car, but dignity returned. Patricia came by with tears in her eyes, whispering, "You saved us all." And me, I just stared at my scratched Toyota in the driveway and thought about how this all began with a parking spot. with a kid slamming his door into mine. Something so small, so ordinary, unraveling into a war that had nearly consumed us. Funny how life works. Sometimes it's not the big battles that define us, but the tiny sparks we refuse to ignore. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was brutal. Lawsuits, media coverage, HOA board resignations, investigations into other communities Laura had touched. The machine she'd built crumbled piece by piece, and every crumble revealed more rot beneath. But what stuck with me most wasn't the headlines or the victories. It was the quiet moments. Jennifer laughing again for the first time in months. Tyler getting his driver's license renewed under his own name, no guardian attached. Miller taking his Porsche out for a Sunday drive with the top down, wind in his hair, a smile on his face that said everything words couldn't. Sometimes I catch myself thinking back to Laura's words, "This is temporary." Maybe she was right. Maybe everything is temporary. Power, control, fear. But so is silence. And sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to stay quiet to bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. And if there's one truth I learned through all of this, it's this. The smallest battles can reveal the biggest wars, and ordinary people, tired, scared, flawed, can still win them. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.